What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. I have a question for you. Do you meditate? Because I do, and in this video, I'd actually like to share not necessarily the reasons, but I really want to share with you to how the journey, like how I ended up um, adopting, if you will, the practice of meditation, because it actually started when I was a believer. And I'll share a few things about why I do so and why I think that that it's beneficial. So before we jump into that, you already know how the routine goes. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell so you can be notified, and then consider joining this little experimental community that we're building on this channel. You can join via Patreon, you can join via our YouTube membership program, or you can just go ahead and jump in Discord and start getting to know us. We're all a little kooky, a little crazy. Uh, you know, comes with the territory. All right, so let's kind of, oh yeah, check out the merch. We have some of the dopest merch in the game. Keep rising. Think responsibly. Sacred Cow Grill Master. You definitely want to wear that to the next family reunion. And then we actually have some more designs that are coming out that we're really excited about. There's a design that I'm playing with in my head that we'll be calling "Keep Your Delusions to Yourself." And for whatever reason, I want to do that one with a teacher. Like, I don't know, like a teacher. I don't know what pointing the finger and waving, like "Keep your delusions to yourself," and or maybe. Ooh, now I want a shirt that has like "I will keep my delusions to myself." So many fun things. And then Sunday, during our Sunday session, someone gave us an idea for a shirt that I thought would be really cool, and that was "Everything is conditional." And then my wife has been really pushing me to do a "Poor Fella" shirt. So we got some more designs coming out, so y'all take a look at that. So let's jump into this conversation, man. Feet first. Or better yet, let's switch that around. Let's jump into this conversation head first. During our Sunday sessions right now, we are in a series called Change My Mind, where we are exploring this idea of mind change. Like, how exactly do people change their minds? And though we are playing on somewhat of a very relevant and very popular idea, because everybody seems to want to change somebody else's mind, what we're really doing in this conversation is highlighting what we already kind of know about the mind and how ideas form. And so, since we're kind of having that conversation on Sundays, which we actually will be doing a series on meditation. I think it's at the end. It's either at the end of this year or the beginning. I think it's around Christmas time. I think it's around December that we have that planned for. But we will be doing an entire Sunday session series conversation on meditation. So you can go ahead and save that date, whatever that date's going to be, because it's going to be good. And I'm thinking about, like, I was going to name it. I thought I was going to name it like Natural Woo, because meditation still lives in that realm of woo, but it's a completely natural process, at least from the things that we understand about it. But now I kind of want to name it World War Me, but we'll see. All right, so let's jump into this. I want to talk about meditation and the complexity of me, and basically how Christian prayer led me to secular meditation. And so my journey to meditation as a practice absolutely began when I was a Christian, and it almost as the posture of receiving in prayer after making petitions. And even though I wasn't using the word meditation, this is definitely what I was kind of being postured for, because in the early circles of the church that I was a part of, meditation was definitely considered like a big no-no. That's Eastern religion, and it's just like, you do realize that like Christianity is Eastern religion, right? Like, I don't know, like I don't know, I know we have these ideas of Western thought, but and yes, those have been integrated with the Bible, but the Bible is a book of Eastern religion. There's really no way you can get around that, especially if you're in the United States saying that. Like, come on now. Everything is east of you, you know? But so they were definitely very anti-meditation, which I found very odd, because there were a few scriptures, where David say, I'd meditate, on certain things. And then Paul would say, think on these things, which is kind of like meditative, or at least contemplative. But of course, as I move from those more traditional churches, and those traditional churches were still Pentecostal, but this is kind of where you see the line drawn between Pentecostal and charismatic, is that Pentecostal churches typically build their experience and expectations off of tradition, while charismatic churches, who believe in a lot of the same things, typically build their expectations and experience off of experience. The experience almost comes paramount, like it's the thing. The experience itself almost becomes the voice of God. And so you very much do become like a almost like like an experience chaser on the charismatic side. You're chasing this high. You're like a storm chaser. You're chasing the presence of God. And I was definitely that person. I was one of those people who believed, and this was even in high school, who believed that my appropriate response to God should be to dedicate 2.4 hours of my day to praying. And that was my way of tithing my day to God, tithing my time to God. This thing went deep for me. Um, and so like I can remember in the both Pentecostal and charismatic circles, laying on of hands is a big thing. Charismatic circles, it becomes a little more sophisticated, more formulaic. But in those approaches, typically you'll be in the altar call line, and they'll tell you to lift your hands. You know what I'm saying? Even before the person has got to pray for you, they'll tell you to lift your hands. And even this, in a lot of ways, was somewhat. It's not the language they were using, and it definitely wasn't the intention. But that was probably some of my earliest engagement with being postured towards the idea of meditation, because they'd often say stuff like lift your hands and put yourself in the posture to receive, you know. And I was a tongue talker, and so I spoke in tongues. And so oftentimes what I do, I just have my hands up and I just be there speaking in tongues, da, ba, da, ba, da, which interestingly enough, I still speak in tongues, sometimes in jest, and sometimes just to clear my head out, just to like, you ever been speaking and you couldn't get your words together, you're like, blah, 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 just to kind of get everything out. Now, instead of doing the blah, 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 I just speak in tongues, and it's just nicer because the blah, blah, blah is a little rough. And tongues were always so eloquent. They were always so romantic. I don't know if you've ever heard people sing in tongues before, but it is absolutely captivating. It literally draws you in. It's beautiful. It's scat, man. Tongues is scat. That's all it is. But anyway, so that kind of getting in a posture of receiving. So I'd just be speaking in tongues, and eventually preachers, because it's kind of formulaic, they say, okay, don't speak in tongues, just receive. And you're supposed to be receiving something from the Holy Spirit. But for those of us on this side, we know there is no Holy Spirit. So this is likely, along with prayer itself, is something that started a significant dance with this inner voice before I was really comfortable 100% just saying, okay, that's just all me. All of these voices, all of these thoughts, that's me. Just getting into that posture. And I'm not trying to say that to praise this idea of laying on of hands, not at all. Because I am like 99.99% sure that this is not the experience that other people was having. I had a lot of wrestling in my head that was going on for years. But even moving from that, okay, and the idea of having hands laid on you, and you be receptive and you be open. Prayer, you can only really pray for so long. And when I say that, if you're sincere about your relationship with God and you try to govern that relationship with God by scripture, you really can't, in good faith, spend an hour praying words. At some point, you feel like you're violating scripture, or at least this was my experience. At some point, you feel like, okay, something I've done here, I've approached this the wrong way, I'm violating because God says that or Jesus says, your Father already knows what you have need of, but before you pray, and and not to do a whole bunch of repetitions, and so, and don't be like the heathen and the sinner and all of this stuff. And so you open up. Typically, you open up your prayer with these conversations that you're having with God, which is, for me, a lot of times where it starts off with, praise, how wonderful you are, because God is a king that absolutely has to have his ego stroked before you can have a conversation with him. But, you start off telling God how holy he is, how awesome he is, how beautiful he is, even though you've never seen him, how wise he is, how pure and holy he is, and how much you desire to be like him, and how grateful you are for his love. And then you eventually get over into a venting session, but life is hard and this shit is happening. And, Pookie and Ray and them is pissing me the fuck off. And Mama and them, she got the gout again or whatnot. You go into the venting session and pour out all of your issues. And then typically at the end there's some type of resolve, nevertheless, God, you are God. You know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. Not my will be done, but your will. It is not I who live, but you who lives within me. Hallelujah. And so you go through that. But again, if you're good faith and you're trying to have this biblically accurate relationship with God, what ends up happening is you get to the place of silence. And that's where you kind of, or at least for me, you end up slipping over into meditation, especially when the soaking movement became popularized. Because I was already soaking long before the soaking movement, because again, after about 15, 30 minutes of blabbering, it's like, okay, I'm talking too much. At this moment, I'm supposed to be letting God talk to me. And that became the idea. And so just to kind of paint the image, I had a room in my house that, and many charismatic believers did. That was my prayer closet. It was also my gym, but it was my prayer closet. And I'd go in there and I'd literally lay out a blanket and I'd get on my knees and start praying first, going through that whole spiel that I just kind of walked you through. Obviously, it would vary from time to time. And then after that, I would just lay out on that prayer blanket, or I'd just sit on that prayer blanket, or I'd just kneel on that prayer blanket, because all of these things were what you do when talking to God, apparently. And at that moment, I just sit. And what my intention was to hear the voice of God and to hear God and to perceive God's instruction and the leading of the Spirit in my life. And ultimately, this is where these kind of prayer and worship moments converged into moments of uh, reception, which were really just moments, when I go back and look at them, of reflection and introspection. The only problem was I was calling that voice of introspection the voice of God, or calling that voice of reflection, the voice of the devil, or some other demonic, ungodly influence. But for me, there was an intentionality about making sure that I was letting the Spirit guide the experience, being sure to detach myself from the thoughts and the emotions that rose as a way of following the Spirit. Now, being by doing so, because there isn't a spirit, I inadvertently begin developing the muscle of mindfulness and meditation, if you will. Because again, at this moment, I am in those moments of soaking prayer. I was already developing the practice of detaching myself from thoughts and emotions as they arose. But again, the problem was I was assigning identity and agency to those thoughts and emotions. So I detached that, no, this isn't me, but instead it was, this is God, or this is the devil. And we'll kind of jump into this a little bit more. Now, I dare say, accidentally adopting this practice as a habit likely contributed to the liberty of thought that actually led me from the religious superstition. Um, because, and I think any of you if any of you, and I'm curious about this seriously, if any of you have adopted the practice of meditation or mindfulness, then I'm sure you've possibly seen how maybe you've had more expanded thoughts about yourself and about the world you're engaging in, and that definitely helped for me. So that's my little backstory. I want to give some definitions, and I always kind of like to give more than one. So, according to neuroscientists, they kind of define meditation, or neuroscience defines meditation as a mental training practice that can improve a person's psychological abilities, such as their attention and emotional self-regulation. See, that's enough for me. It can improve my psychological abilities. If you would have told me that as a kid, I would have been meditating just to see if I could have become Matilda, you know. But attention and emotional self-regulation, which I've definitely noticed that in my own life. It involves training the mind to focus on its own mental activity through observing ongoing mental and physical experiences. This training could lead to changes in mental states or longer lasting traits. And then, of course, just the idea of training implies an exploration and intentional development of capacity. In that way, while meditation seems like a very passive practice, this definition highlights the measurable utility of meditation as a proactive methodology for self regulation and, dare I say, improvement. You know, now, according to the NCI Dictionary of Cancer Terms, meditation is a mind body practice that involves focusing on something to reduce stressful or distracting thoughts and feelings. You just think about that. I forgot what is it called, the Lamaze classes. I don't know if women still go through those. I know my wife didn't. But to help them through with their contractions. I was about to say with their contradictions. Yikes, that feels like a bad sexist joke. But to help with their contractions and breathing through. And so, that's some of that science there. Um, this can include focusing on an object, word, phrase, or even breathing itself. I don't view meditation as a fixed or static practice, which I know there are a lot of people who do, who believe meditation has to be done a certain way according to a certain, group of rituals or whatnot. But because of that, this is actually why I like the inclusion of this definition, because it reminds me that meditation doesn't just have to be about focusing on breathing. Meditation is really just about building that muscle for attentiveness and mindfulness. And for me, it's helped me tremendously in my conversations with being more honest, open, authentic, clear, and refined when speaking with people. Because I've gotten into this point that I kind of consider myself just kind of always living in sort of a meditative state, or at least a contemplative state, where I'm allowing myself to pay attention to the details without judgment, and it helps. So you'll notice it even on some of my videos, whether we're doing live or it's pre-recorded. I can be in the middle of a sentence, and a thought will arise that I may be like, "Oh, let me think about that for a moment," because I'm not so married to the experience as I planned it. I now realize that I'm somewhat of an explorer, and so it's okay for me to behave as such. I know as a pastor there was always this pressure to complete this well polished package, and now like I realize like I'm the complete package, period. And I'm not saying that out of arrogance. That's me. That's how I feel like people should feel about themselves. That like you should feel like you are you, and you shouldn't have to censor yourself or make yourself sound better, look better, or whatever. This is why I don't do a lot with my beard and all that stuff, because like I'm already married. Like, who am I trying to impress? Like, and so no, if you value me, I hope it's not for my beard. I hope it's because you value me. You see how that works? Oxford has a very concise definition of meditation: the practice of focusing the mind in silence. And I like that, focusing the mind in silence. I don't, I don't. Okay, okay. I had to think about that because I'm like, I don't know if I can make my mind silent in here, but it could be talking about in a silent environment. But as you'll find out, I prefer not to meditate in silence. I actually like audio stimulation or oral stimulation for meditation. And believe it or not, I actually enjoy visual stimulation for meditation, and it's typically either for me. I like visual guides of the galaxies. And they're not accurate always. If they were, they probably wouldn't be as majestic. But there's typically like a lot of color, a lot of light, a lot of movement. So I like stuff like that, and then I forget what you call this stuff. Just psychedelic. Yeah, I like psychedelic stimulations, geometric formations, anything like that, which are things that are abstract. And it's very interesting because even when I was a pastor and we'd get to the highly spiritual parts of the service, I had my musicians trained to when we were ministering to people while the music was playing, not to play recognizable music. So instead of playing a song, just played different medleys that were not recognizable, that created kind of flow, which I was definitely one of those type of preachers who I preferred the preaching accompaniment music to be more like score music as opposed to dun, 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 yeah. I like to just still be able to talk and stuff like that, but I could do those things too, and I did sometimes. But I had them trained to do that, and I was one of the few pastors that did things that way. And it was for me having the recognizable melody would be too much of a distraction, and for me, I wasn't even thinking about them. This was for me. It would be too much of a distraction, and and even for them, actually, I was because I do remember talking about it. It'll have people more tuned into singing the song than focusing on the moment, and really getting whatever. And this was the language I used back then, getting whatever they're trying to get from God. And so play something that's still like that's soul stirring, and that's typically in a minor key. That's soul stirring in a minor key with a little resonance of hope on it, that has some nice moments of crescendo, rise, and build. That as me as the communicator, which is very much the pastor's voice in accompaniment services is very much like the conductor's wand. The musicians are following the rise and the fall of his voice. When he's up, the music is getting up, and then when he's bringing down, the music is coming down. The drums are pulling out a little bit more. They're not as heavy on the snare and the kick. They're probably doing more cymbal work right now with a few chimes every now and then. And then your keys and your synthesizers have shifted to either more brass or more string sound, with the little keys undernoting it, because these are sounds. And the funny thing is, the people who are making these decisions are not engaged with the science of these things. So this is why I do say, when people say, "Oh yeah, pastors are manipulating people," they're manipulating themselves. They don't know the science behind this. They've just observed that, oh, God seems to move stronger when things are happening this way. At least that was the way that I was looking at it. But anyway, I made that decision for the idea of kind of recognizing that things that were that had form were distracting in these moments that were meant to be contemplative. And so that is something that I've carried over with me. The goal of meditation, from what I've understand, is to stop identifying with your thoughts and emotions, because that self identification oftentimes lies at the root of suffering. You know, it's the idea of, you have this thought, so you are that thought, and now you're grieving because you are that thought, as opposed to realizing that that thought is a part of you, but it's not you. In the same way that your arms are a part of you, but your arms are not you, nor are they a proper reflection of you. A proper representation of you. I think if I just had your arm, I don't know if I'd be able to identify if this was you or not. And your thoughts are like that as well. Your thoughts, your emotions, especially with the more that we understand about consciousness, which granted is still not a very lot, which is not a lot. Which is why another reason I'm like, we need more critical thinkers. We need people who are exploring the problem of consciousness, because this is really a fascinating realm. And meditation is at least one of the ways that we as individuals can kind of start exploring this idea of consciousness on our own. In this way, meditation can help break us from certain cycles of pain by helping us train ourselves to recognize our thoughts and feelings as objects that exist apart from our actual identity, apart from our consciousness. Mindfulness is simply a state of open, non-judgmental, and non-discursive attention to the contents of consciousness, whether pleasant or unpleasant. And so, a way that I used to kind of talk people through it, and this was long after I deconverted, is and even without using the word meditation, when people were trying to make difficult decisions in their lives, even without using the word meditation, the advice I often give is just why not sit down and just dump all of you out and explore it, and just, I mean, just literally let all of you out, kind of like on the table, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and detach any false or positive judgment values. Detach any judgment values and just explore it. And that's ultimately the heart of meditation. Is this type of interrogation of the self without assuming you know the answer. That is so good. All right, so cultivating this type of quality of mind has been shown to modulate pain, mitigate anxiety and depression, improve cognitive function, and even produce changes in gray matter density in regions of the brain related to learning and memory, emotional regulation, and even self-awareness. And this is true. I think the more and more I've adopted the practice of meditation, the more and more I've definitely become aware of myself, and I've made a lot of decisions with that awareness. For example, I was just in an interview or a meeting with someone, and I was sharing with them that I don't answer my phone because I gave them my number. And I said, you can text me anytime and you can call me anytime, but I just want to let you know I do not answer my phone. But if you leave me a voicemail, I will call you back. If you don't leave a voicemail, I'm not going to call you back, because that's the actual reason that I don't answer my phone. Is that through this mindfulness and meditation, I begin to realize that your boy deals with a high level of anxiety. It's just the way that my mind is wired. And so anytime somebody would call me, anytime my phone would ring, though I was going to answer it, I was going to go through a mini panic attack every time. And then the first 5 minutes of the conversation, I was going to spend overworking my brain trying to figure out what this person, wanted or was going to say, if it was going to be bad, if it was going to be negative. And I begin to realize, like, this isn't conducive for me, and I don't have to live this way. So, and also, I was always answering my phone and ended up getting stuck on the phone for hours and hours at a time. Because again, with that type of anxiety, I was always afraid to tell people, like, hey, I'm actually too busy to talk right now, that I'm actually preoccupied. Not afraid of that anymore, because number one, I don't have to even have the conversation because I don't answer my phone. And if it is something important, you'll tell me when you leave the voicemail, or you'll say it in the text, and bam. So that's just one of the many ways that meditation has positively impacted my life. Meditation seems to be a practice that enables an individual to zoom out to get a better view of the complexity of self. One of my favorite songs is a song by an artist named Hamza, and it's called "Hard to Love." And I know some people take those type of things with negativity. I don't, and I that song was like my anthem all 2023, because it was like, yeah, I can finally say it and not feel bad about it. Like, I'm likely hard to love. I'm a person that's hard to love. Not in the sense that I'm not, easy to deal with, but people are complicated. And like, I now have the freedom to be like, oh yeah, I'm complex. So it is what it is. But the major work then becomes undoing the definition of self that has resulted from hyper focusing on objects of self without exploration or even awareness of the whole. I hope that kind of makes sense. We often hyper focus on thoughts, emotions, and events in our self definition and experience, which limits our scope of actual self. It'll be similar to defining yourself as hands, feet, and a heart. These are all accurate descriptions of the features of you, but they do not reflect the totality of you. And all three are connected, impacted, and influenced by other parts of you. The thoughts, emotions, and events in our lives are similar in that way. meditation helps us kind of remain mindful of that reality. And I mean, just even saying that feels like it kind of lifts a burden. Like I often trip off of reminding myself that biologically, we're literally several trillions of organisms coexisting as one experience. We're several trillion living organisms that are part of this body, all of this good looking body. There's several trillion organisms that are collaborating and cooperating to make this living experience functional, operational, and hopefully healthy. I almost imagine meditation as taking the brain off of autopilot. Kind of separating yourself from being I guess, a victim to intuition and instinct, and elevating the curious interrogation of consciousness to the driver's seat. A character that I've seen model this in a television show is Jonah from Superstore. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that. Absolutely funny story, funny show. I thought it was brilliant for the most part. But Jonah's character was this was a person who just exuded this extreme curiosity and a type of intellectualism that is subject to updates in real time against the backdrop of interactions with others. So often you could see his character often looking off to the side while people are talking, or even while he's saying something. Like I remember they were having a conversation about politics and or doing something, and they were like, "Well, that's just mob rule," and he was like, "No, that's democracy." And it was like, "Well, what's the difference between mob rule and democracy?" And then instead of him answering the question, he said, "Huh, I should have an answer for that," because he's actually, and this is something that I've been able to get from my adopting of meditation. He was answering the question in real time, which when I've worked with other people, that's something I've encouraged them to do, especially like if you have trouble communicating. When you're asked a question, before you answer it, ask yourself the question. You'd be surprised how many people don't do that. I mean, it's literally the majority of us. And so while the answer we give may be accurate, we're completely disconnected from it, and that's typically what happens, because we're already kind of wired in a way to just operate off of the information that has been freely available to us. And typically that's popular narratives, otherwise known as propaganda. And so when you're just running off of that, you're really never interrogating, do I know this for real? And so that's just one of those ways that meditation really kind of helps. But it's also a big reason why I wanted to have this conversation is to remove meditation from out of the realm of woo and show and demonstrate how this is actually a practice that most of us are already engaged with in some way or another in our lives already. Just like critical thinking is, even before many of us deconverted, it's just now, once you realize that it's a muscle that you can actually flex, that you can actually work out, and that you can actually build, then it actually becomes very fascinating territory. Excuse me. So meditation does have some scientifically proven benefits, and I will share a few. Um, One of the biggest ones is physical health for a myriad of reasons. I'm not going to say if you meditate, you will lose weight, but I will say that I started losing weight after I started meditating. And I don't think it was necessarily the meditation, obviously, that led to the weight loss. It was the clarity of thought about me. It was the clarity that led to my weight loss and some other improvements in my health. Meditation can lower blood pressure and resting heart rate, which can, of course, reduce strain on the heart and blood vessels and help prevent heart disease, which is important. So, heart disease is a real issue in the Black community. So, if you are Black and you are watching this, how about you play some Kenny G and give yourself about 5 or 10, 15 minutes to take a breather. It's good for your heart. And then eat some Cheerios afterwards. Now, let me stop. Also good for your mental health. And that one I could talk about for days. And I do plan on spending some more time on this channel talking about mental health. And the ways that we have so many who are undiagnosed, such as was I, who are living with all types of hardships that seem unbearable. But meditation is one of the many tools that you can use to start getting some sense of clarity and control in your life. For me, again, it's worked wonders. Meditation can help reduce anxiety, depression, and obsessive compulsive behaviors. It can also help with insomnia and past traumatic stress disorder. And again, and I want to say this, it's not just because meditation is magical or anything like this. It's you that's doing these things. It's like saying that, going to the gym can help defeat robbers. It's not going to the gym that's helping to defeat the robbers. It's you building those muscles and getting that experience of using those muscles that gives you some type of expertise in using those muscles, or at least some type of experience with using those muscles. And so ultimately that's what you're doing, is you're building your brain muscles. And so, like, I don't want to say meditation helps you make better decisions, but meditation kind of helps you make better decisions. But of course, the reason I don't want to say that is because better is extremely subjective, you know. But it can help you gain a clarity of thought to give you more solidarity in the decisions that you want to make. And in that way, meditation can positively impact emotional well-being. Again, it helps people manage stress by clearing away information overload, building stress management skills, and helping people develop a new perspective on stressful situations. It can also help reduce negative feelings, increase positive feelings, and help people become more compassionate. Which, come to think of it, I do feel a little more compassionate. And a big one, cognitive function. I feel like I am Rain Man right now. Oh, I cannot remember the line. If I could remember the line, I'd do it. Meditation can also help people process information more effectively and slow the cognitive effects of aging. And who are we kidding? We haven't solved the aging problem yet, so let's all get some meditation in. Woosah, right? It can also help people develop self-observation skills, which can help them integrate new information in the present moment. Meditation can also increase creativity and divergent thinking, which can help people solve problems and think outside of the box. And I am definitely a divergent thinker, and it's like, oh, it feels so beautiful. And meditation has helped me kind of gain appreciation for that. And so while I do tongue in cheek often say that atheism saved my life, what it actually did was for me, what it actually did for me was to ground my approaches and expectations in reality, and help me realize that I never needed supernaturalism for my personal growth and development. By all accounts of what people often describe as spiritual, which I argue all exists within the realm of the neurological, sociological, or psychological, from everything that I've heard, my spiritual life has drastically improved since I started keeping spirits out of the equation. And so that's been, like, honestly, my journey with meditation. Is a practice that I plan on continuing. It's a practice that I've shared with my family, including my children. Um, my kids, if they're having a rough time or something, sometimes they'll just go in their room, play some soft music, find somewhere to chill out, because we don't have a very dogmatic approach to meditation. While meditation itself, we do know the benefits of it, and we do know that it works. As far as creating formulas around it is nothing more than speculative, which I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I just think if we do it, we should take a very scientific method, scientific approach to that, to where we understand that our formula is hypothetical, in a sense that it's a hypothesis until we tested it, you know. And then testing it is like, hey, let's all try it this way for a while. Let me try it this way for a while, see what the results are. And then let's get some other people to test it, see what their results are, which also then means you need to have a way of being able to measure the results outside of just anecdotal. And so, and again, many of those benefits speak to some of those areas, such as the high blood pressure, though you can actually track your high blood pressure. You know, you say, okay, I'm going to adopt a meditation routine for a few weeks. I'm going to make sure I check my blood pressure every day at a certain time and see if there's been any difference after meditation. Now, just to be fair, if you're going to do that particular experiment, you need to first do it without meditation for a few weeks, clocking your blood pressure at the same time so you can maintain your variable and your controls for your experiment. All right, so I've said a lot. I did not mean to get all scientific at the end. Just wanted to share this about one of the ways, or many of the ways that meditation has been beneficial for me as an individual, and really just how, for me, I ended up slipping into it accidentally, not knowing that I was adopting this very secular process. But even by doing so accidentally, it may very well have been my slippery slope. Because again, it was the thing that gave me more time to explore my thoughts. And though at the beginning I was exploring those thoughts as, okay, this is God, this is the devil, these are angels, these are demons, this is the Holy Spirit, this is some body praying against me. Eventually, kind of had like sort of a Westworld experience where I was able to sit back and look at all of those voices already detached and say, oh, all of that is a part of me. But thankfully, I was already at the place where none of those things were definitive of me. And at the end of the day, that's what meditation is, as I understand it, it is a practice to interrogate the self. And it's a practice of interrogation that leads to improvement without bringing improvement into the interrogation. That's such a weird way to say it. Because when you're interrogating, the act of meditation isn't like affirmation where you're like, hey, you're better, you're good, you're this. It's no, who are you? Where are you? What's going on in there? And that can be an immensely profound experience that you are able to manufacture for yourself at any given moment. So I hope I've said something of value today. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider joining our growing experimental community, and check out our merch because it's some of the dopest merch out there. All right, I think I've said enough. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay absolutely beautiful if you can. I'll holler at you later.